Hi, I'm Cynthia. Nice to meet you. Before I tell you my story, kindly hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I like to know where you're from. Now let's dive in. I used to think family loyalty was the one thing you could count on, especially when you built something together from the ground up. My parents started the company when I was still in college, and I poured myself into it right after graduation. Long nights, endless coffee, and weekends sacrificed so the business could grow. I knew every detail, every client, every new initiative. It was more than a job, it was my life's work. Which is why the betrayal cut so deep. It started subtly. My sister Sable began sitting in on meetings I usually led. Just to learn, she'd say, flashing that perfect smile of hers, the kind that made people forgive her before she even messed up. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, she'd never shown much interest in the company before. But then reports I'd written started going out under her name. My proposals, my research, my ideas, suddenly credited to her. One morning, I walked into the office and noticed something odd. Our company website's About Us page no longer listed me as a co-founder. My name was gone. My bio deleted. It was as if I had never existed in the company's history. I felt the blood drain from my face. I confronted my parents that afternoon. "Cynthia," my father said with a sigh, as if he'd been expecting this, "you've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe it's time you took a step back. Focus on your health." "My health?" I repeated, stunned. My mother avoided my eyes. "You've seemed unstable. The board is concerned." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Unstable wasn't just a casual insult, it was a loaded accusation. One that could destroy a reputation. 2 weeks later, I was officially on leave for mental health reasons, according to the internal memo they sent to staff. No one asked for my side. No one questioned it. Sable slid into my position without a hitch. I spiraled for a while. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak. The narrative they'd painted of me was so calculated, so clean, that even a few close friends started looking at me differently. It wasn't just about losing the company. It was about losing my credibility, my identity. Then, one night, I stumbled across an old email thread between me and a vendor. I had pitched an innovative design concept, one the company was now using as a cornerstone of their latest product line. Only now, it was branded as Sable's brainchild. And that's when the fog of grief began to lift. I realized I wasn't just the victim of a cruel family betrayal. I was the victim of theft. Intellectual property theft. Defamation. And I had the receipts to prove it. From that night on, I started documenting everything. Emails, presentations, meeting notes, text messages. I dug through my old files, combed through public statements, and cross-referenced them with my work. The pieces fit together like a jigsaw puzzle from hell, revealing a picture far uglier than I could have imagined. They hadn't just replaced me. They'd erased me, stolen from me, and weaponized the stigma of mental illness to keep me silent. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, stacks of papers and my laptop in front of me, thinking, if they wanted me gone so badly, they're about to regret not making sure I stayed down. This was no longer about getting my job back. This was about justice and making sure they never did this to anyone else again. And I was ready to play the long game. Once I decided I wasn't going to just roll over, my nights changed. Sleep became optional. I'd sit in my apartment with nothing but the hum of my refrigerator and the blue glow of my laptop, organizing evidence like I was building a case for a stranger's murder trial. Only this time the victim was me. I knew I couldn't just storm into their boardroom with a box of papers and demand justice. People like my parents and Sable didn't operate in emotion. They operated in strategy. They'd already crafted a perfect public story about my mental health leave, complete with sympathetic tones and headshakes. If I came at them too soon, I'd be painted as proving their point. So I started quietly. First, I contacted a friend from law school, Dan, who now specialized in corporate litigation. I didn't give him everything right away, just enough to see if I had grounds for a case. After 2 coffee meetings and 1 late-night phone call, he said, "Cynthia, they didn't just sideline you. They've defamed you and stolen your intellectual property. If you have more proof, we can make this stick." That was the green light I needed. I built a digital fortress. Everything I collected, emails, documents, screenshots, was backed up in 3 different secure locations. I even printed hard copies and stored them in a lockbox at Dan's office. I knew my family had resources, and I wasn't going to underestimate what they'd do if they suspected I was fighting back. The hardest part wasn't gathering proof. It was pretending I was still the broken, fragile woman they thought I was. At a family dinner one weekend, Sable leaned over to me with a pitying smile and said, "I'm so glad you're taking care of yourself, son. The company's doing great. Your ideas really laid the groundwork." The nerve. I bit back my response, forcing a small smile. "I'm glad it's working out." But inside, I was thinking, you won't be smiling when you see my court filings. Over the next 2 months, Dan and I pieced together a timeline so tight it would be impossible to dismiss. Every key project I'd developed, every strategy I'd implemented, was documented under my authorship. We matched them against public statements and product launches where Sable was credited instead. Layer by layer, we exposed the theft. Then came the uglier part, the defamation trail. In internal emails, my father had referred to me as unstable and unreliable. Sable had sent a message to a major client implying I was under medical supervision and unable to continue professional work. These weren't just casual jabs. They were deliberate moves to tarnish my professional reputation. The more we uncovered, the less it felt like just a family betrayal. It was corporate warfare, wrapped in the guise of concern and support. And it was chilling to realize how easy it had been for them to rewrite my story. One evening, as I was leaving Dan's office, he looked at me and said, "We're almost there, Cynthia. But once this starts, it's going to get ugly. Are you ready for them to come after you?" I didn't even hesitate. They already did. This time I'm fighting back. I knew filing a lawsuit would change everything, not just for me, but for the family. The company's spotless reputation would crack. The public would see the fractures. And I'd finally reclaim my narrative. I wasn't sure how much damage they'd try to do to me in return. But I did know this. For the first time since they erased me, I was the one writing the next chapter. And it was going to be one they'd never forget. The morning we filed the lawsuit, the air outside felt different. Sharp, almost electric. Dan had insisted we go early, before the building filled with the hum of lawyers and clerks. Walking through those courthouse doors, I felt a strange mix of adrenaline and dread. My family didn't know yet, but by the time the paperwork hit their desks, the clock would start ticking. The filing was direct and devastating. Intellectual property theft, defamation, and wrongful removal from the company. Every claim was backed by evidence so tight that even the best PR spin would have trouble unraveling it. By noon, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Sable. "Really? This is how you want to handle it?" I didn't reply. Instead, I saved it to my growing file of communications. The first public reaction came faster than I expected. By the next morning, an industry blog had picked up the case. They didn't have all the details, but they named me, the company, and my family. Comments poured in, some supportive, others skeptical. The court of public opinion was officially in session. That's when the counterattack began. Within 48 hours, my parents' lawyer released a statement calling my claims unfounded and deeply saddening, painting me as a once-valued family member who has sadly succumbed to personal struggles. They didn't outright say I was unstable again, but the implication was there, clear as day. Dan warned me this was exactly what they'd do. "They'll try to make it about you, not your evidence," he said. "Stick to the facts. Don't take the bait." Easier said than done when your own mother goes on record saying she hopes you find peace. But something surprising happened. A former employee reached out to me, a woman named Lila, who had quietly left the company 2 years ago. She told me she'd seen my ideas being credited to Sable and that she still had copies of old internal memos that proved it. She wasn't the only one. Over the next week, 3 more ex-employees contacted me, each with pieces of the puzzle I hadn't even known were missing. It was like watching a tide turn in slow motion. Meanwhile, the company tried to close ranks. Sable posted glossy photos of herself at industry events, smiling in designer dresses, captioned with motivational quotes about family unity and overcoming adversity. I recognize the tactic. Paint a perfect picture while the storm rages behind the scenes. But perfection has cracks. During discovery, We unearthed an email from my father to the board, written the day before I was put on leave. It outlined a plan to restructure leadership by removing me and positioning Sable as the fresh, stable face of the company. The word stable was underlined. That one email felt like a smoking gun. Dan grinned when he read it. This is going to hurt them. Still, I knew the fight wasn't over. My family was wealthy, influential, and vicious when cornered. They'd throw everything at me. Financial pressure, media manipulation, emotional guilt. But something had shifted in me since the night I started collecting evidence. I wasn't the daughter who needed their approval anymore. I was the woman who was going to hold them accountable. The next hearing was set for 2 weeks out. And if they thought the filing was my first strike, they hadn't seen the arsenal I'd built. 2 weeks felt like both a lifetime and a blink. Every day leading up to the hearing, I woke up with a knot in my stomach and went to bed with my mind racing. The stakes weren't just financial anymore. They were personal, almost primal. On the morning of the hearing, I arrived early. Dan was already there, calm as ever, flipping through our binder of evidence. Across the aisle, my family filed in like they were attending a gala instead of a legal proceeding. My mother wore her pearls. My father adjusted his cufflinks. Sable, in a tailored navy suit, didn't look at me once. When the judge called us to order, the air in the courtroom shifted. Dan presented our case with precision. Emails, contracts, design drafts with my name clearly visible, followed by public releases where those same ideas were credited to Sable. Every exhibit was like a hammer blow. Then came the defamation evidence. Dan read my father's underlined stable face of the company email aloud. The judge's brow furrowed. My parents kept their expressions neutral, but I caught Sable's jaw tighten. Their lawyer tried to push back, leaning heavily on the narrative of my mental health leave. But when pressed for documentation beyond vague concerns, he stumbled. The judge asked a pointed question. So you have no formal evaluation, no doctor's report, no documented incidents. Yet you circulated this claim internally and to clients. Silence. In that moment, I saw the first crack in their armor. During the recess, Sable cornered me in the hallway. "You're destroying this family," she hissed, her voice low but sharp. "Do you even care?" I met her gaze without flinching. "You destroyed it the day you signed your name to my work." Her eyes narrowed. "You're going to regret this." But there was something else in her tone, something brittle, almost desperate. Back in court, the afternoon session brought a surprise. Lila, the former employee, testified. She spoke clearly, recounting how she'd been told to remove my name from documents before sending them to clients, and how she'd been warned that Cynthia isn't well if anyone asked. Her testimony landed like a bomb. I felt a wave of gratitude and a flicker of hope. By the end of the day, the judge set a date for mediation. It was a sign the court saw merit in the case, and that my family might want to settle before things got uglier. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the city lights. I thought about how far I'd come from the night I first opened that old email. Back then, I was fueled purely by anger and grief. Now there was something else: resolve. I knew the settlement talks would be their last chance to make this go away quietly, but part of me wondered if I wanted quiet anymore. Maybe I wanted the truth to be loud enough that no one could ever erase me again. The breaking point wasn't the moment they took my place in the company. It was here, now, when I finally saw that their power over me was already slipping away, and I intended to break the rest of it. Mediation day felt strangely quiet compared to the charged atmosphere of the hearing. We met in a neutral conference room downtown. No judge, no spectators, just my side, their side, and a mediator trying to keep the peace. My parents looked tired. Sable's perfect composure had slipped. She kept tapping her pen against the table, a nervous tick I'd never seen before. Their lawyer spoke first, offering a settlement figure that was almost insulting. It didn't even cover the estimated value of the intellectual property they'd taken. Dan didn't flinch. "We have more than enough to proceed to trial," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And if we do, everything becomes public record. The emails, the testimonies, the strategy to discredit her. Is that really the road you want to go down?" I watched my father's jaw tighten. He knew the damage a public trial could do, not just to the company's finances, but to its pristine reputation. My mother shifted uncomfortably, glancing at me for the first time in weeks. The mediator suggested a break. I stepped out into the hallway, leaning against the cool wall. I thought about everything I'd lost. My position, my credibility, my relationship with my family, and about what I really wanted from all of this. It wasn't just money. It was acknowledgement. Proof that what they did to me was wrong. When we went back in, Dan laid out our terms. A financial settlement that reflected the value of my stolen work, a public statement from the company retracting their mental health claims, and my full intellectual property rights returned. The room went still. It took hours of back and forth, but by late afternoon, they agreed. There were no hugs, no apologies, just the signing of papers and the finality of a deal struck under pressure. As we walked out, Sable brushed past me without a word. My parents didn't look back. I thought I'd feel triumphant, but what I felt was lighter. Like I'd finally dropped a weight I'd been carrying for years. The next week, the company released a short but significant statement. We regret previous comments made regarding Cynthia's departure and acknowledge her valuable contributions to our success. We apologize for any misunderstanding. It wasn't dripping with sincerity, but it was in print. And it was public. The settlement money gave me options, but it wasn't what I used to measure my win. Instead, I put a portion into starting a mentorship fund for women who'd been marginalized or pushed out of their careers. I named it the Phoenix Fund, because rising from ashes felt like the perfect metaphor. The rest I used to start my own consulting firm, small at first, but fully mine. No one could erase me from my own story this time. One evening, months later, I passed by a magazine stand and saw Sable on the cover of a business publication. The headline praised the company's latest venture, but buried in the article was a single line about my lawsuit and the settlement. Just enough to remind anyone paying attention that the story hadn't been so perfect after all. I smiled to myself and kept walking. They'd taken my place in the company, but they hadn't taken my voice. And now, my voice was louder than theirs. Because in the end, reclaiming my narrative wasn't about being part of their history. It was about writing my own. If you enjoyed my story, don't forget to like and hit subscribe. You will also enjoy other stories on AJ family drama. Until next time, bye.